From the end of the Civil War to the beginning of World War I, the United States was a completely different country economically, socially, and technologically. Indeed, from 1870 to 1914, the U.S. underwent drastic changes. We now call this period the Second Industrial Revolution. There are many reasons why it occurred, including the opening of western frontiers, the discovery of rich mineral resources, and the increasing population due to immigration and natural growth. After the westward expansion, railroad tracks were necessary to reach the Pacific and open up trade networks. Communities that were separated by hundreds of miles were now accessible thanks to the great technological advances made in transportation. Roads, steamboats, railroads, and canals link parts of the country, enabling the shipping of products on greater distances at a lower price. Transportation, as well as mechanization, which increased productivity of factories and undercut the need for skilled labor, radically transformed the nature of economic activity in the United States. The mass production of consumer goods drove prices down. Therefore, people could afford to invest the new technological innovations. After the annexation of California, discovery of gold in the West, and California's statehood, interest to unite the country spurred. In 1862, the Pacific Railroad Act chartered the Central Pacific and Union Pacific Railroad companies to build a railroad linking the U.S. from east to west. The bill stated that the two companies would build this railroad for 6,400 acres of land and $48,000 in government bonds for each mile built. On May 10th, 7 years later, the Transcontinental Railroad was built, stretching from Sacramento to Omaha. The railroad successfully united the nation and turned manifest destiny into a reality. Before the railroad was built, a journey across the continent required a dangerous 6-month trek across rivers, mountains, and deserts. The Transcontinental Railroad took it down to 2 weeks and changed the price from $1,000 to just $150. Within a few years, the frontier wilderness of the West turned to regions full of European Americans. As railroads continued to branch out across the nation, the natural resources of the West could be cheaply and quickly transported back east to be processed and consumed. Water, timber, copper, coal, iron, and more became accessible to factories in need of materials and fuel. In the West, boomtowns such as Virginia City sprang up around gold, silver, and copper mines. Equally important was the United States human resources. Between 1860 and 1900, over 14 million immigrants flooded into the U.S., and the competition for jobs allowed businesses to profit on cheap labor. The enormous labor force also bolstered the economy by increasing the demand for consumer goods such as food and clothing. Another crucial natural resource during the Gilded Age was coal. It was cheaper and more efficient than burning wood, and steamboats, railroads, and factories came to run on either coal itself or electricity from coal-burning generators. By 1910, the United States had become the world's largest coal producer, churning out nearly 550 million tons per year, or enough to cover Manhattan Island in 21 feet of coal. Oil was also gaining popularity. While automobiles had yet to be invented, oil was useful for lubricating machinery. Petroleum could be converted to kerosene, which fueled the oil lamps and stoves of American homes. Iron was another vital resource for the industrializing nation. With the introduction of the Bessemer process and consequent availability of cheap and plentiful steel, robust machines were produced, skyscrapers came to dominate the skyline, and additional railroads became even more inexpensive to construct. With the Transcontinental Railroad in full swing and the accessibility of the natural resources, inventors had everything they needed to create their inventions. The invention of the elevator in 1853 made multi-storied skyscrapers, hotels, and businesses more practical. Henry Bessemer and the Bessemer steel process created the first cost-efficient steel process and made it possible for steel to be manufactured in bulk. The accessibility of steel accelerated industrialization by providing material for machines and structures, and its usefulness made steel the first billion-dollar industry in the world. Samuel Morse invented the telegraph and created Morse code, which, while it was eventually overshadowed by the invention of the telephone, was still essential to the development of long-distance communication. There were also agricultural advancements, such as those by George Washington Carver, who discovered over 200 uses for the common peanut. Bell first thought of the idea for a telephone while visiting his mother. Because his mother had impaired hearing and Bell had been working extensively with deaf people, he developed electronic speech, or the telephone.
Essentially, if I can make a current of electricity vary in intensity precisely as the air varies in density, then I should be able to transmit speech telegraphically.
While Bell was developing the telephone, Thomas Edison was developing the light bulb in New York.
You know, many people up to this point have developed forms of electrical lighting, but my goal is to develop a type of light that is practical, safe for home use, and economically friendly.
After the light bulb was patented in 1880, Edison worked on distributing this new form of affordable and safe energy around the world. In every aspect of society, the Gilded Age was a time of change. Within a few decades, railroads crisscrossed the nation, skyscrapers towered over sprawling cities, and factories expanded overnight with the introduction of new technology. Production became more efficient, consumer goods became cheaper, and the candle became the light bulb. With the onset of the Gilded Age, only one thing was guaranteed: America would never be the same.